est omnium protectorem, et in locum refugium, ut salvum me facias, quoniam firmamentum meum, et refugium meum est tu, et propter nomen tuum, lux mihi eris, et nutries me. In te nomine speravi non confundar in eternum, in justitia tua liberami. Gloria Patri et Filium et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Est omnium Deum protectorem, et in locum refugium, ut salvum me facias, quoniam firmamentum meum, et refugium meum est tu, et propter nomen tuum, lux mihi eris, et nutries me. In the reading from the letter of St. James, we have a reference to the need for patience. The word patience comes from the root for to suffer, pati. A patient is a sufferer. The passion is the suffering of the Lord. And patience then has to do with letting something happen. A person will not let it happen if he rebels. Therefore, the will is the element that enters into play. That then gives messages to the body with regard to the way that pain is handled. But there are many pains not of a bodily order. Patience is much needed in our fragile state, for pain comes to us also precisely on the level of the will itself. And sometimes physical pain would seem to be less painful on that level than pain to those who really are suffering atrociously, invisibly, only on the level of the will, for all that is coming up against them in their experience of life. Having said that, we need to bear in mind the powerful analysis made by Simone Weil in her comment. She was analyzing the way in which a human being can improve what is going on in the invisible field by strengthening the will and purifying the mind. And in the volume which has become a classic as L'attente pour Dieu, Waiting for God, she puts it thus, that it is only physical pain that actually need have that damaging effect on the level of the interior. Of course that can be handled to such an extent that one can be victorious of it. But her point is this: the other the purely invisible, is precisely on the level of the invisible, and therefore can be fought, handled and conquered by the strengthening of the invisible. The will sometimes can limit the damage of its state, and indeed the will can be its own worst enemies, and must we realize that much pain is actually of its own origin, that the will who wishes too many things is condemned to cause pain also to itself, whereas the will that is there patiently, that is acceptingly receiving and indifferently accepting and not commanding that things be or not be, is free and therefore suffers less. And she is writing purely on the philosophical plane. She is also making a comparison between the way in which the mind, when praying well and studying well, is strengthening itself. For to do those invisible activities, one needs to have a strong interior life. And the mind, therefore, which damages its interior, is damaging its interior life also in relationship to God, because the mind needs to communicate between the will and the will, and an encounter between two persons is an encounter between the will and the will of two persons, and in the case of prayer, between the will and the divine will, the mind and the divine mind. And therefore, if we can't do it, if our mind is not able to fly and to function with depth and intensity of contact, then also our interior life is very poor. It is not at all enough to pray exteriorly. There has to be contact. As between people living together, it is not enough to be in the same room watching, for instance, the television. Contact is of a different order, and if it's not there, one asks why, one has recourse to a third party. One word about the Gospel. It does echo what the Lord gave as an instruction to those he was sending out. He told them that if they went into one village and they did not receive it, they were to go on to the next, but that they were, as they were leaving, to shake off the very dust from their feet as a sign against them. And he himself here, when he is leaving the dialogue with the Pharisees, does not do that, but discreetly moves on, as we would say. And leaving them again and re-embarking, he went away to the opposite shore. They were wanting a sign. They were wanting something in the limelight. The Lord could see their motivation and could see that there was no point in satisfying a mere curiosity when the will was not rendered. And so he is warning us through them to be careful of wanting the spectacular and of being ungrateful for what is there. Which brings me to where I want to land. Ungratitude is a fundamental issue and a disease of the soul. And if we do not appreciate either the goodness of other people, in expressing it also physically and audibly with our voice and our gestures, we are likely to be in the same attitude towards the giver of all. It is important that one gives thanks for daily bread, for the new day, for the end of the day, for things that happen, the joys that come to us, that they be referred to their ultimate source immediately. And that, by the way, is a test. Do we do that? That prayer, that ejaculatory prayer of thanks and praise, is a mode which can be cultivated and makes us beings of praise, a different mode of living through time. But when it comes also to the great gifts of God, a word in scripture or in a homily or in a book, a grace perceived in prayer or the Blessed Sacrament received, these are moments to be grasped and used well, and that means in a grateful mode. One can see the devotion of a person by the way that that person handles the most sacred. and unfortunately the Lord is not well received. Indeed, we receive well what we wait for with patience, and patience also is something to do with waiting well for something not yet there. We can ruin the present moment through wanting too much something not yet there to be there, not realizing that the waiting itself is a moment of joy. There is a kind of chemistry in the being that we enjoy twice something yet to come. Let us enjoy then the moment of waiting as well, because otherwise we'll think that this moment is less precious because the other one has not yet come, and sometimes we're disappointed when the other one comes, so we've wasted both. But with regard to this, let us remember that when the sacraments are received, for instance, rarely, as in the East, or not yet received, as in the case of a devout child, or somebody being received into the Catholic Church, then they are waited for with great desire, and the fruit is greater when it comes. When also certain things are difficult of access and handled by only certain people and at certain times, there is an awesomeness about them which immediately crashes down when all those barriers of defense are taken away. Just one small parenthesis with regard to that. It came through in the exorcism of Annalisa Miguel in Germany that many of the things coming in to the life of the church at that time were being pushed from below, precisely because of the hatred of the demons for the sacred, for God, for the Creator. And therefore there was a head-on fight and attack on all that was sacred. And one after another, people were not realizing that the things which were becoming very quickly common practice were of questionable origin initially. It was each time a great victory for the enemy of God and of mankind. The sacred protection of the Most Holy should be bit by bit frittered away by a process of erosion, so as to arrive at what we have now, for instance in Ireland, where in practice children do not read, or do not know, or do not hear what the nature of the Blessed Sacrament is. Therefore all the rest will follow. The whole barrage of education to the sacred has just been taken away. So what surprise if there is little thanks for the most holy thing of all. Just to conclude, it's rather like what Shakespeare said in All's Well That Ends Well. These are the words of Helena in Florence in Act 4, Scene 4. Time was, I did him a desired office, dear almost as his life, which gratitude through flinty Tartar's bosom would peep forth and answer thanks. Mandu caverun eres adoratis omnis, desiderium eorum adoniteis Dominus, non sunt fraudatia desiderio suo. its mystery sing, and the blood all rising sending, which the world's eternal King, in a noble womb once dwelling, shed for this world's ransoming. Glory let us give and blessing to the Father and the Son, honor, might, and praise addressing, while eternal ages rule, ever to his love confessing, who from birth with birth is one. Amen.